don't look to quite so much that the central banks are trying to achieve is because the central banks don't like to talk about them. The first of which is very good for governments. We saw yesterday the government for the first time issued a 2-year gilt at a negative interest rate. It got paid to issue debt. So getting all of this tremendous amount of debt out the door, negative interest rates help. And then the other thing is the currency. I mean, I think, again, that's something the central banks don't tend to stress because it's not neighbourly to try and depreciate your currency against your neighbours. But again, the UK is going through the Brexit process, a weaker currency and trying to grab some demand from the global economy would probably help in that regard.
Yeah, and you're a woman who would know because you started your career at the Bank of England, of course, and you've advised former chancellors also. Are things changing in the UK in the sense of the independence of the Bank of England? I know it's a big question, but there are issues around this now, aren't there? Because the crisis is so severe, there is pressure on the Bank of England, to do the bidding of government. Is there pressure on the Bank of England's independence here?
So there's nothing that's happened so far that I find suspect. So you're absolutely right. They did take a somewhat risky but leap towards clearly presenting themselves as working together. It was coordinated action, and they made no bones about that at all. However, this is where I think Governor Bailey could just maybe, as he's pushed on this question, provide a little bit more clarification on how it's the inflation target, their official mandate and their independence that is allowing them to do what they will do, and therefore what the limits are to their future action. I've got a piece coming out on this. So I'm glad you've asked me this question because I can tell you specifically. I think what the governor should say is, we are only willing to clearly help when we are filling a deficiency of demand. Now, when we get back towards normalisation, then you're on your own. If you have other government projects, whether that's the levelling up agenda, that's not for us at that point. So this is purely demand management. Secondly, if it starts to show that it's impacting supply, so, reducing the incentives in the economy or leading to a misallocation of resources, then again, that could conflict with our inflation mandate. So I think the governor just needs to, at this point, just make absolutely clear that its North Star is its inflation target. It has acted according to that, but it will continue to in the future.
By the way, I'm looking forward to that piece. I am skeptical that there is such a thing as a truly independent central bank, or truly independent anything, frankly. But I guess some lean in that direction, maybe more than others. By the way, when we look at the possibility of a vaccine, Karen, I mean, I know you're a wheelhouse, you're an economist at heart, but you're the market strategist here. What do you think about these stories that AstraZeneca may have 400 million doses by September, or Moderna is making progress, Moderna isn't making progress. Everybody's working so hard on a vaccine. Isn't it inevitable that somebody comes up with one soon?
Yes, but I do think the timing is really important. So, Matt, the way I've been thinking about this is, you've almost got two sides of the canyon. One was where we started the year, and the other was when we'd truly beaten this, and the vaccine was an important component of the other side. Now, the more narrow that canyon is, then the greater chance there is that the bridges that the central banks and the governments have provided get us to the other side. So they stop any scarring. However, if it's not September, if it's September next year, because actually, the phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, the clinical trials do take a lot more time, then I think our risk is we get the economic scars. So we get the unemployment, we get the corporate insolvencies. And that just then, I think, we really need to know that our policymakers, we're going to get a new fiscal package from the States, we'll get a new one from the UK. They're going to keep extending those bridges. But I think it does challenge, certainly where investors sit today and market pricing today about, where we end up. So great news, but I do think the sooner the better.
Yes, I'm sure everybody around the world is in agreement with that. Karen, thank you so much for joining us this morning, both on Bloomberg Radio and television. Karen Ward, who is Chief Market Strategist for EMEA at JP Morgan Asset Management.
And with that, let's get over to Leanne Guerin. She's got your global news headlines for you, Leanne.
Matt, it is in fact Sandra Kilhoff here with your world news. There are now more than 5 million confirmed COVID-19 cases in the world, according to Johns Hopkins. It comes after the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus has issued a warning, saying the pandemic is far from over.
We still have a long way to go in this pandemic. In the last 24 hours, there have been 106,000 cases reported to WHO, the most in a single day since the outbreak began.
It comes as the global coronavirus hotspot, Brazil, has had another record day of infections. Bloomberg's Shannon Sims reports.
The health ministry is tackling this by trying to widen the use of chloroquine, the controversial anti-malaria drug. And in Sao Paulo, which is the epicenter of Brazil's outbreak, the governor is trying to issue lockdowns to keep people home. He's ordered the next few days to be holidays as a hopes that people won't be in the streets. Shannon Sims, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, Spain's parliament has voted to extend the state of emergency for another 2 weeks once it expires on Saturday. Bloomberg's Rodrigo Orihuela has the story.
The motion passed by a tied 15 votes as the two main opposition groups voted no, arguing that the Prime Minister no longer needs exceptional powers. Sanchez says the exceptional powers are necessary to reach the target of ending a national lockdown sometime in late June. Madrid, Rodrigo Orihuela, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the biggest cyclone in 2 decades has ravaged India's eastern coast, knocking out power across Kolkata. Bloomberg's Ruth Pollard says millions of people have been evacuated.
The cyclone, which has weakened from the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane to a Category 3, crossed the coast of India and Bangladesh on Wednesday, killing at least 12 and destroying thousands of homes, with evacuations hampered by virus precautions such as social distancing. In New Delhi, Ruth Pollard, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much for that, Sandra Kilhoff, with all the world and national news. So coming up next, a shot in the arm. AstraZeneca gets $1 billion from the US to develop that COVID-19 vaccine. But does that put America at the front of the queue? Well, we're going to hear from Bloomberg's interview with Greg Clark, of course, a familiar name in the UK, House of Commons Science Committee Chair and the former UK Business Secretary. So an interesting voice on the coronavirus and much more of what's going on in Britain. That's next.
All right, looking forward to that. And as we head to break, let me just point out, we're looking at equity indexes across Europe that are down a little bit more than 1%, 1.33% on the DAX and the CAC 40. If you're preparing for the U.S. Open in New York, futures are also off about 0.75% for the S&P 500 mini contract.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
When the market is unpredictable, BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Influential Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
Joining us now, best-selling author and New America Senior Fellow, P.W. Singer.
You didn't plan to be releasing a new book in the middle of a pandemic, but your new book does speak to a lot of the themes that we're seeing now. Paint the picture of this world that now isn't just fiction, it is reality.
So the book Vernon is a new kind of book. It's a smash-up of novel and nonfiction. Essentially, it's a techno thriller set in Washington, D.C. of the future. We follow an FBI agent hunting a terrorist, but baked into the story is more than 300 explanations and predictions, but it comes with the nonfiction footnotes to show, hey, this is actually from the real world. And so in this depiction, in this explanation, the trends that it looks at in particular, the growing use of AI and automation, that was already in play before the pandemic. All the data is showing that they've been drastically accelerated and going to be a key issue coming out of all of this. And so I think the big issue and why this book is relevant is that all the business, political, social, security, even family questions that our characters deal with are all going to come quicker in the real world, too.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Hodern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's a risk-off Thursday morning. The CAC and the DAX are both down more than 1%. The FTSE 100 down 0.9%, and U.S. futures also in the red. S&P 500 mini futures down 0.8% this morning. This comes after we saw red arrows across the screen in Asia as well. One of the sentiments weighing really on the market this morning is this escalation between D.C. and Beijing. A number of events happened yesterday that put Beijing in the crosshairs of Washington. But the one that really everyone is talking about is, of course, that tweet from President Donald Trump would suggest that pointing the blame directly at Xi Jinping, the president of China. Also, with the risk-off sentiment in foreign exchange, we are seeing the euro a little bit weaker against the U.S. dollar. It shrugged off those flash PMIs, which saw the expectations beat in Germany and France. We also have a stronger U.S. dollar. The Bloomberg dollar index up 0.3%. An outlier this morning, though, is oil. WTI crude up more than 1%, just under $34 a barrel. It's rising for a sixth day. It's the longest streak in the front month contract since February of 2019. This comes after the U.S. stockpile draws with some stabilization in the oil market. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kiloff with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Police in the U.S. have arrested 2 men who are charged in Japan for aiding the escape of former Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn. Ghosn jumped bail and fled Japan late last year to escape trial for alleged financial crimes. He denies any wrongdoing. Brexit tensions are boiling over amid a growing spat between Britain's chief negotiator David Frost and his Brussels counterpart Michel Barnier. The two have achieved little over the last few weeks, and now next month's summit looks certain to expose key divisions between the two sides. A trial to see whether 2 anti-malarial drugs could prevent COVID-19 has begun in Brighton and Oxford. Chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, or a placebo will be given to more than 40,000 healthcare workers. And Greece will allow direct international flights to Athens from June 15th, with other tourist destinations to follow on July 1st. Officials didn't specify which nations tourists will be permitted, only that they will be from countries with low infection rates. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kiloff. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
I'm not even allowed to go to Frankfurt, you know?
I know. I can't even go home, Matt, to my country, Denmark.
Yeah, but you live in a different country. I'm in Berlin. I have an amazing interview opportunity on Tuesday in Frankfurt. I would just jump on my bike and shoot over there. I can get on Ducati to Frankfurt from Berlin in about 4.5 hours.
But will somebody actually stop you on the road? Because that's the issue here in the UK. Here, you're told not to go anywhere, but it's rare that you get the police. There is in Germany, though.
Oh, I have been stopped. I was pulled over a couple weeks ago taking Steve hiking in a neighboring state. The problem is, if I would be allowed to go to Frankfurt to do the interview, but when I came back to Berlin, because of different rules in different states, I would have to quarantine for 14 days.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Unacceptable. All right. Thanks very much for that, Sandra Kilhoff. Let's get to one of our top interviews this morning. In the last hour, Anna and I spoke with Greg Clark, UK Conservative MP, chair of the House of Common Science and Technology Committee, and former UK Business Secretary. We started out by asking about vaccines.
Well, I don't have any visibility on that particular deal, but I do know that the UK government has been in talks with AZ, and obviously the work that's being done in Oxford is very important. There is a new manufacturing centre for vaccines being developed at pace in the UK, and there are very good working relations, I understand, between the company and the university and the government. And it's right that we should, wherever we are in the world, be getting ahead of the need to deploy those vaccines. What we mustn't have is to get a vaccine that works and that is safe, and then find we've got to wait a long time before it can be deployed at scale. So I think it's the right thing to be anticipating and putting in place that capacity now.
Are you nonetheless optimistic? We hear from now numerous companies that they're close to developing and have production capacity sorted for a vaccine that should be able to stave off a second wave of the general public, next year.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of scientists working quite rightly at pace on the development of vaccines. We don't know yet which will pass the test, get the regulatory approval. It's right that there